So I'm going to be adding a navbar or a header to the top of this application. That way we can easily navigate between different pages, and also to take a look of how this integrates with React Router and also Apollo. So to do this, I want to first start off by actually having a home page, or at least something rendering on this page. So to be able to do that, I'm just going to say create a new route and have it set to the path. And instead of creating a new component, I don't really care what it looks like, so I'm just going to say render div home page so that I know that I'm on the home page and we can see that div rendering here. So the next step is to add the navbar to this, and I don't just want to add it to this home page here, but I also want to add it to all of them. So how can I do that easily? I could create a header component and go in and add it, but that's a little bit annoying. So what we can do instead here is create a header component up here, and now it's going to render no matter what route is being displayed. And now I'm just going to wrap this with a div here, and then I'm also going to see that we have two sibling components here, and we have two siblings under browser router. It doesn't like it, so I'm just going to say react.fragment. That way there's only one. So now we only have one child, and then everything else is under it. So this header is what we're going to create. So I'm going to create a new folder called shared, and let's go ahead and say header.tsx. So I'm just going to say div header, and I just want to go ahead and see this. Well, let's import it first, but I want to see this and make sure it's being displayed on all these pages before we make it into anything. So now I see the header here, and if I go to /register, for example, the header is still there. So perfect. So no matter what page I go on now, it's going to just be sitting there at the top. So I'm just going to do a little bit of styling on this. I'm going to make the height 50, and then let's go ahead and say width is 100%. I'm going to make the background color an off-white, so that way we can just see what the header is and what's not the header. I'm also just going to say display flex, because we're going to add some items to this. So I'm going to say I guess let's do like an H2 and say stripe example. And then I'm also going to create a div down here, and this is just going to be some links. So I'm going to have a link to the login, and then I want a link to the register. Alright, give that a save. And then I'm just going to say justify content, and I'm going to say space around. That way it spaces it a little bit. So like before I add that, you'll notice they're kind of all scrunched, and this will give it some space between them and around them and make it look a little nicer. Alright, I also want to add just some padding around it. So I'm going to say like padding 10 to give it a little spacing. So now what I can do is I can start clicking on stuff, and I think it makes sense to also make this H2 a link. So I'm going to say 2, and just going to go to the home page. So I'm going to click on login, takes me to login, go to register, or click back here. So now we have basically a standard header that you might see, and it's basically a static header, right? The content doesn't change depending on the page or depending on the user. So the next step we want to take is to kind of be able to do that. But before I do that, I want to go over how you might want to not display the header on every single route. So for example, I like to not have it on the login page, and that's really just going to be because we're going to be adding something to the login page which resets the client or resets the cache, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so if the header is also fetching the user, it kind of conflicts a little bit. So anyway, I want to set it up so only some pages have the header. How can I do that? Well, we're using this thing called switch from browser router or from React Router DOM, and how it works is it picks one route to be rendered. So what we can do is we can say route here, and I'm going to say path is equal to slash. And so what this means, it's actually going to render on all the paths. And I'm just going to say exact here. So the difference between this one and this one is, I think I just have to say true. So the difference between these two routes is this one's going to render on all the pages because slash matches all the time. If I say exact, there can't be anything at the end of it like a word or something. So now I can say render, and I'm just going to render all this stuff here. And I'm just going to say React, well, I guess I can just add a div right now. Oops, paste that in. All right, so now this switch has an option of choosing one of these two routes. It can either pick the login page, or it can pick this basically catch all. So what the switch is going to do is it's going to first check if we're on the login page. If we are, it's just going to display login. Otherwise, it goes in and displays, and we have a nested route here. So why did I even do this? Well, what this will allow us to do is to move this logic down inside of this. So I'm going to move that there, and I'm going to move that down here, and we'll get rid of that div. So I'm just going to get rid of that div we have there. So now we have a switch, and then we have a single route, the login, which does not have a header. And then this is all the other routes. And then this is going to match everything else. And then inside of here, we're going to have a header or div, and then here are the rest of our routes. So let's see this in action. So we're on the home page. If I go to register, it's still here. If I go to login, it's now no longer there. So now, if I ever want to add a new route that does have the header, I add it here. If I don't want the header, I add it outside. And it's important to make sure that it's above here as well, because the switch is going to look in this order to render them. Alright, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and talk about how we can have this guy displaying different data. So we're going to be using kind of a similar technique we use with this account over here, where we use the me query. And I want to use the same me query that we used here, so I'm just going to create a new folder here called GraphQL. And inside of that, I'm going to create a folder that's called queries. And inside of that, I'm going to say me.ts, and I'm going to just paste that in there. And now we can use this me query in multiple places. And I'm going to export it, and we're going to import this from not GraphQL tag, but Apollo Boost. And now on my account page, I just need to import that. Alright, so didn't change anything there, but now I can use that in my header. And I'm just going to copy this logic here, copy that bit, and add it to my header. So the thing that's going to change is this part right here. So I'm actually going to add it right here. Alright, so I need to add a return statement. So return, and then closing curly brace, another curly brace, and then the query. So let's go ahead and import this from React Apollo. We need to import this from schema types and import this from that. Alright, so what else is this complaining about? Children are incompatible. We're also not using, let's get rid of that. Okay, that was the problem. So we're currently not using data. So we're also using network only here. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I first just want to get this working. So again, we're going to display null if it's loading. I'm going to say null also if we don't get any data for some reason. And then I'm going to say if data.me, if it's not that, we're going to return this. So if we did not get a user, we're going to tell them to log in. But if we did log in, so that's going to be the last statement. User is logged in. We're going to have a single div with our link, and it's going to say account. And it's just going to take you to the account page. So this is, we don't want to show them the account page until they're actually logged in. And this should actually take you to account. And we don't want to be able to, there's no need to log in or register after you're logged in. So again, we have a place where we're conditionally rendering something here, depending on if the user is logged in. And let's see, on our account page, I just have to get rid of that GQL. All right, so now let's go ahead and log in. So I'm going to say c@c.com, log in, and now I'm at paid users, and I can see my account up here. So if I click on that, it's just going to take me back here. But if I am at the home page, I now see the account because I'm logged in. I can click on that, it takes me to paid users. So cool, that's what I wanted to set up. But now we have kind of a inefficiency. So the inefficiency is I am grabbing the user here. I'm grabbing the user over here. So we're grabbing the user in multiple places, or we at least have this me query in multiple places. And right now we have the fetch policy equal to network only, which means it's going to make a request to the server. So I believe if we open up our network tab, we can verify this. If I go to that page, I think we might make 2 requests. I'm not sure. It may cache one of them. So let's go ahead and refresh here, clear it, and go to account. So it actually just makes a single request. So that's good. That's what I wanted to happen. But we don't even have to make a single request at all. So like, look at my network tab. As I come over here and I go back to account, we're going to be making requests each time. Instead, what I want to now set up is so we cache that user. And to be able to cache the user, that's actually what the default fetch policy is. So it's called cache first, which means it's going to look for the cache for that user first. And I want to also do that in my header as well. So do that here. So why did I not have that before? Well, we had a little problem with the login not realizing it. So what do I mean by that? So get rid of this, clear it. So now we're not logged in, and now try logging in. And okay, so first let's go to the account page, or the home page, for example, before we do this. So we just made a request to the server to see who the current user is. And we saw that the user is not logged in, so we displayed login and register. So now it's going to cache that the user is not logged in. So when I log in here, you're going to notice it takes me right back to login. It redirects me even though we have a token and we are logged in. And the reason for that is because it's using that cached user that is null, that doesn't exist. So after we log in, what we need to do is actually update the cache. So that's what we're going to go over how to do. So I'm going to add that right here to the login view. So there's 2 things that I want to do. I want to update the cache, but also before I update the cache, what I'd like to do is to be able to, with the client, clear the cache altogether, which we're going to talk about in a second. So with our mutation now, we can, if we take a look at the Apollo documentation, we can pass a prop called update, which is going to handle how this user gets updated after we log in. So the data we're going to get here is going to be called login, and if we look at what we are going to get, it is a user with an ID and email. You'll notice we're also going to want a type here, and the reason for that is we're also using a type in our me query, so we need to make sure we get that same data. So what we're going to do here is we're going to log in, and usually what you do is you read from the cache first, but in this case we don't really even need to read from the cache. We can just directly write to it. And I think data could be undefined, so I think that's why I need to add that there. And I'm not sure why that, do I have an extra curly brace? Can't find the name data. As soon as I got rid of that destructuring, it just flipped out. There we go. I think I had an extra curly brace. So if data does not exist, we're going to return. Otherwise, I think we should have data.login. Yeah, which that could be null as well. Alright, so if we do end up getting a user back from the login, what we'd like to do is we'd like to update the me query. So we're going to say me query here, and we're going to say here's going to be me, and it's now going to be equal to our user, which is going to be data.login. So data.login contains the user, and we're just storing that in the cache for us. So let's take a look at what that means. So now in my console, we're going to say c@c.com. And let's start by coming here though. So we're currently logged in. Let's clear that. So we now have in the cache that the user is not logged in. We'll log in, c@c.com. And now it shows that we are logged in okay, because we are now updating the cache, which is great. So now if I go to this page and go to the account page, if we look at our network tab, clear that and go back and forth, you'll notice we're not refetching the user every time. Now you could still refetch the user if it's important, but this is one setup you can do that where we don't fetch the user, which is nice. So that's how you can set that up, is by updating the cache after you log in that user. Alright, so there's one last thing that I want to do, and that is to reset the cache after the user logs in. So the second parameter here gives us, and I was just looking at that, if I hit control space inside of here, I can see all the things that I can do. And the thing that I care about right here is the cache, or the client, sorry. And what this client allows me to do is to do any number of requests. So client, the thing I care about is the reset store. So this is something we don't really need in this particular application, but is kind of nice to add, is to reset the store before you log in the user. And the reason for that is it kind of just clears off any old data that the user might have in it. So this is kind of an optional reset the cache before the user logs in. And I don't think this should really affect the behavior. Let's make sure it doesn't. So come here, log in, and it looks like it works the exact same. But now if we went to the login and log in as a different user, it would get rid of the user that we had before that was cached or whatever. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.